Hey friends, I'm Zach.
And I'm Trish, and you're listening to
The Backwoods Business Podcast, where we talk with real people
about real business
who have real problems
and real solutions. Let's get real.
Today we are with
Mike. We're going with Mike or Michael from Calavera?
Michael
from
all right.
Calavera Tools. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Tell us a little bit about your business.
So I started Calavera in 2015 after, I think, 15, 16 years in corporate. And, you know, after so many years in doing some pretty cool jobs, I like to say, I just decided it was time to have something for myself and build something for my own family and, you know, quit making money for Germans. And I wasn't, you know, the aspirations when I left corporate were a lot different than they are now. But I have zero, well, maybe a couple of regrets, but not many. You know, it's been a really, really good run for my family and me, and we're really happy with, you know, what Calavera's kind of become, which is we're most well known for our leather work aprons, and these are primarily oriented towards, say, woodworkers and carpenters, makers. The maker community in general is really where these things have thrived. But, you know, also bartenders, barbers, baristas, welders, knife makers, you know, anybody that wears an apron anywhere can use a Calavera apron.
And you have an awesome product too. It's not just a leather apron. I mean, you have the bison ones, and it is an awesome quality product. We've been impressed by your product when we first saw it a couple of years ago. So it is awesome. That's part of the reason why we're so excited to talk to you too, actually.
Well, you know, we get all of our hides from one of the last tanneries in the United States, which is Sidell Tannery up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so we get, you know, loads of, you know, basically we bring in bison and cow hides by the pallet load. So when I order leather, you know, I'm not ordering just a couple of hides at a time. I'm not running down to Joann Fabric and getting the cheap upholstery stuff.
Yep.
I'm ordering, you know, generally ordering in 250, 300 hides at a time. And,
Wow.
you know, it makes a lot of aprons, but we make a lot of aprons.
So what I'm hearing is sourced in the U.S. and made in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I know it's what we look for in a product. So I think that that's phenomenal that you're able to keep that circulating in the U.S.
Yeah, I think that's been one of my, let's just say, from literally day one. And, you know, not in a way, you know, not in some like, I don't know. I don't know how you want to put it. It's like the whole ideal of American made. Like, you know, it's I don't want to do it just for the sake of doing it. It's like, I got a better way to put it. Sorry, I'm sitting here fumbling because I think about it sometimes. But literally, like one of the very first goals of the company was to make everything in the United States and to source everything that we possibly could in the United States. And we've been very, very successful at that. But yeah, taking that a little, you know, let's say closer to home, it's like, you know, I want to fill my house with stuff from the maker community. I want to buy Christmas presents for everybody that I love from the maker community. I want to support those people who've supported us. And, you know, like we need some furniture for a house we bought this past year. And I really want to buy it from within this community. Like, I don't want to go to some store and buy something that was made by some anonymous whoever. Like, I want to buy that from somebody that I'm looking at on my feed every day. And it's an investment. Like, you know that you're going to pay a premium for that. But, you know, what's life but for, you know, quality anyway? Like, why go around, you know, using cheap stuff? I think it's, you know, a lot more satisfying to dog in the background.
Yeah, you got your shop dog.
I love it.
Yeah.
One of the shop dogs. But anyway, I love the idea of not just made in the USA, but, you know, to really live that motto and, you know, keep it close to home. And, you know, you can keep that close to home by buying local, but you can, you know, in today's social media age, buying local also means buying from your community, buying from the people, the online community, the people who are buying my aprons and wearing them every day.
Exactly, yeah. And the side benefit of that is you buy from other people that are creating content and in that online community, then you got yourself some ready-made images of people actually using it, which is always good for marketing, right?
Your advertising right there, your marketing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Share the love.
One of the things that people love that we do is we sell, and we do it at intervals throughout the year, but a lot of times you'll find our t-shirts for $10 a piece. And these are just, really high quality, super comfortable t-shirts. And we tell people, we're like, this is going to be your favorite t-shirt for $10. This will be your favorite t-shirt of all time. And people just snap these things up, and we sell thousands of these t-shirts. And we're not making any money on them. We're basically selling them at just barely above cost. But then you've got thousands of people out there wearing the Calavera brand and spreading the word, and that always feels pretty good. So it not only does it get people to the site, but it definitely helps spread the word.
Definitely establishing that brand. Awesome. That's a big thing. So that what we've talked about so far, that kind of ties in two things that jumped up into my mind as far as what I'm hoping to dial into for this real business, real problems, real solutions. So branding, first off, establishing your brand, and also maybe the manufacturing, the distribution. There's got to be bottlenecks in there, especially doing it yourself. Like with our products, we're in here doing it. I get my 4-year-old out here sanding some of our herb strippers sometimes, So
no question about it.
Exactly. So what would you say? Let's start with bottlenecks, I guess. What would you say are some maybe bottlenecks that you've overcome or still struggling to overcome? What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you how we've kind of adjusted our manufacturing process over the last several years is, number one, I believe in keeping the aprons super streamlined. I don't believe in throwing the kitchen sink and, just let's say, ridiculous custom stuff. Like I see people on some aprons, they're putting like a 12-inch square, attaching it to the front of the apron. And all I can think is, that's not necessary. Like not only is it not necessary, but it's kind of pointless. Like how many times, do you really need a 12-inch square on the front of your work apron? So it seems ridiculous to me. It seems showy. It's like, somebody's putting it on there so that other people can see that they bought this, 12-inch woodpecker square. And that seems ridiculous to me. But so that kind of has driven this, almost not absolutist, but this mentality of, I want these things to be streamlined, and I want them to be, uncluttered. I don't want to create gigantic open pockets that are going to collect a ton of sawdust. So everything we do has a purpose. Like we don't do anything just for looks, and we're not going to throw a bunch of extra stuff on there so that you can put 10 pounds worth of junk on the front of this apron. And we found that's people sometimes come to us and ask us for all this random stuff, but then once they get this streamlined, their pockets and their tape clips and their towel rings, we do a lot of stuff, but we do it within a system, right? And so once people get it, they're like, oh my gosh, thank God I didn't put all that stuff on there. And so again, a lot of people will come to me and ask me, should I just go full in and add all of this stuff right when I order? And I say, you know what, why don't you get it, keep it, use it for 6 months, and then come back and say, this is what's missing. This is what we need to add to that. So we have retrofits. If somebody wants to put something on after the fact, they can come back and we can always put that on. I mean, literally these things are built to last for the rest of your life. These aprons are designed to never, ever wear out. And as such, you got time. Like you don't have to do it all up front, all at once. But going to your question of the bottleneck and the manufacturing, it ties into that directly. So, when I first started the company, it was very simple because there was an upper pocket and there were 3 sizes of aprons or I think there were 2, whatever it was. And that was it. Like there were not a whole lot of options. But after 6 years of making these things, we've added a couple of different types of lower pockets and flaps and straps and tape clips and towel rings and, various different color options and things like this. And so all of a sudden it went from, a couple of handfuls of options to now, literally, if you did the math, you're talking about thousands and thousands of combinations that you could put together. And I remember it was like 2 Christmases ago, I thought, all right, we're going to build a ton of inventory in advance of Christmas because these are our best sellers. And, coming from corporate and kind of a data-driven industry, or at least that was my role, I thought that I could just look at a spreadsheet and say, okay, these are our best sellers. Let's just make a ton of these. So I made a ton of those and I put them all on the rack. And I even, we packed some of them up. We had them in boxes. They were ready to go out the door.
Ready to rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And actually that's where that whole program was born. That hot now, ready to rock is, I had these extra aprons because nobody bought them. Like all of those that I thought were going to be the best sellers, all of a sudden I had to unpack and put back on the rack because we, once we had introduced certain, features, then what I realized is that, there were definitely some trends and definitely some, let's say some heavy hitters, but to create an apron and keep stock on the wall, like all of these aprons behind me, they look like they're in a pretty advanced state of completion, but I could still add, 20 different things, or not 20, I could still add a ton of different stuff to this. Because as long as I don't put straps on them, then there's a whole lot I can do. But so that's kind of what we did to overcome that challenge. Because, you said it earlier, is fourth quarter is just gigantic. And once we get close to Christmas, it's like, as much as I preach, like get that order in, order cutoff is, December 1, people are ordering up until the last minute. And, as a small business on a high dollar item, like you don't want to turn down the order for that $500 apron.
Absolutely.
So what we basically did was came up with a system where we create the main panel and we pre-assemble the upper pockets and the lower pockets. And so we have, large stashes of all of these things so that, all of the many, many hours of production that go into making these things happen in the middle of the summer. And so then we have bins and bins of all the various parts so that when an order comes in, I could actually throw, depending on how many orders I have in the stack, like I can throw an apron together relatively fast, right? Mm-hmm. But if I had to start from absolute scratch, cutting everything out of the hide, cutting all of the D-tabs, assembling every single little bit and piece, we're talking hours and hours and hours per apron. But by doing it the way that we did it, which was, again, that system of, we guide people into, look, you have, thousands of different potential configurations, but here are the tools to assemble those. You pick and choose what you want, where you want it, and then we'll put it together for you and get it out as fast as possible. I love
that. I think that's so smart. I think that's such a great way to kind of build inventory without kind of shooting yourself in the foot with all the customization. You've got like this great base. Like you said, you could work on it in the summer, prep for that, and then really just kind of customize it as the order comes in.
It's impressive. Exactly. Yeah, it's impressive being able to fine tune that so that you can get it done efficiently with so many options as well. We were talking offline when we first started, how businesses can kind of develop there. But that's one of the things we did wrong, I think, initially as well when we first started our business was we were trying to customize so many things, but we didn't have any process or improved process or efficiencies. No, it was every time a new custom order came in, we would make that one custom order. We were just killing ourselves trying to keep up with that. And it just didn't work. And so you found the key to that is identifying those hot items, hot aspects of it, and being able to build off of it in a specific way where you can still do it efficiently. So that's awesome.
Exactly. And I will say that there's a little bit of, I don't want to say peril, but 3 years ago, and I don't want to speak ill of our product quality, but I've learned so much over the years. And, something that I would have shipped out 3 years ago, I probably would not ship out today. And, some of that is like a good, for instance, is today I was about to put together an apron, and, on the website, they clearly say like, these are natural leather goods, right? And, as such, they're going to have natural blemishes. And this is a huge panel of leather, from a leather working standpoint, like these are huge panels that we're, using for the main panels. And, you can, a bison hide, and you guys live in Montana, maybe you know this.
Yeah.
A bison hide is actually much, much smaller than a cow hide. And so, and two things. Number one, a bison hide is maybe not half the size, but let's say 60% of the size of a cow hide. Number one. Number two is a cow hide that comes in. I could get 3 aprons out of any individual cow hide. A lot of times I can get 1 apron out of a bison hide. And the main difference is that the bison, being wild raised, growing up on the plains, they are subject to animal attack, much more subject to running into barbed wire or breaking bones or, whatever. All of the natural things, insect bites is a big one. But just all sorts of things that scar up the bison leather. So that's why these hides are, number one, animal is smaller, which people don't realize because they're so furry. But two, there's so much less usable area on the bison, on that bison hide. But a cow hide comes in and they are maybe not near perfect, but those are in just tremendous shape, like, very, very few blemishes, because most of those cattle are growing up and existing in a feedlot. There's not much to hurt them. So those are perfect specimen hides that are coming in. So anyway, so the bison come back to this morning. So I started to pre-assemble that apron, and I'm looking at it, and it's got these blemishes in it. And even though on the site I say this is a natural leather good, and there might be the slightest blemish, 3 years ago I would have had no problem whatsoever sending that apron out. But I was looking at it this morning, and I was just like, people are paying a premium for this, and by the time they get it, if they see that weird little, and it's not a birthmark, maybe it's maybe that's what it is, a birthmark. I haven't defined what every single thing is, but they see that and they're like, that just takes a couple of percentage, whether consciously or unconsciously, it just takes a tiny bit away from that experience. And I want them, when they open this thing up, to just be like, completely blown away at how awesome this thing is, top to bottom. And so sadly, that great big panel that I've already put a ton of work into, I'm not going to use it. Like I'll make straps out of it. I will cut it up and put it in the scrap bin, but it will not go out as an apron. And that's tough. That is, especially as a small business owner. So another example that's a little bit more succinct is, I was going through, we pre-make pockets, right? So all the lower pockets, we pre-make them, and, over the course of a year, we go through and we weed out like any of those that have blemishes or whatever it is. And I put together, 20-pound box of pockets that I'm not going to use. And I'm looking at it and I'm just like, we need to, evaluate how we're making these through our process. And these were not made last week. These are some that we've made over time. And, like I said, as we're putting an apron together, it's not like you just grab the next one off of the shelf. We go over and we dig through and we find one that matches that specific apron, because, every one of them is a little bit different shade or whatever. So we're putting together the best combo. But if I look at it and I'm like, I don't see this going on to any apron anytime soon, then I throw it in the scrap bin, and the only way that I know how to do it is to immediately take a pair of scissors or a knife and cut a big chunk out of it. Because that way I cannot, I will not allow myself to use it. I know that, all right, this thing is done. And, so every once in a while I'll find a use for them, but very rarely. So at some point as a small business, you just got to say, who are we now? Is this a level of quality that our customers expect of us right now? And if the answer is no, then you put it in the scrap bin.
Yeah.
I think that's really hard for a lot of people too,
Yeah.
because especially being a small business owner, every single penny that you spend counts, especially when you have
100%.
a family, and especially in the current environment of the times, like literally every penny we spend, whether it's marketing or materials, like every single one of those counts. And so I know how hard that is as a business owner to have to say, like, it's the quality's just not there. We're going to set it aside, move on. Like, you do eat that, but it's almost like it's on a personal level too, because you're like, I've already allocated this, right? Like, it's hard.
Well, not just that, but it's not just the material, because the material obviously is a big cost. And once you cut it out of, a main panel, I could repurpose that into something else potentially, like a smaller pocket. But once it's a pocket, there's really nothing other than straps or scraps that I can make it out. But the bigger issue is the labor, because the labor that goes into, cutting out and then gluing and pre-assembling all of those things, and maybe some sewing goes into it or whatever. And that's the most painful part is, either I sat down at a sewing machine and, so when I throw something like that to scrap bin, I immediately have a trigger of like, I know how much that costs me, not just in material, but more importantly in labor.
Time and exactly.
Oh yeah, it's true. But you can't get that back. And at some point it's a sunk cost, and you say, all right, we had a good year last year, and we're going to have a great year this coming year. And our customers expect the highest quality. So we got to move on. I'm not going to use it.
And that's why you had a great year too, because you know that they expect quality.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's funny. It's almost to a comical standpoint in the woodworking world as well. With the scraps, every woodworker, they want to save all their scraps. Say, I'll eventually use that. I'll eventually use that.
You might.
Until you have a huge pile of scraps. Luckily, we have a wood stove now for our heat here in Montana, and so now everything ends up in there. It's good. It's the equivalent to us taking scissors to it. So
well, I think there's the social media side of things is a lot more interesting than what we do with scraps. But a lot of people don't think about this, and it aligns with what you just said about the scraps. Is for the longest time, from the start of the company, for like the first 3 years, I had no idea what to do with all these scraps. I literally accumulated thousands of pounds of leather scrap. And a lot of those, when we moved, we lived in Indiana for a while. I'm from South Carolina, but we were in Indiana when I worked at Festival. And so before we moved back down to Charleston, I had thousands of pounds of scraps. And I didn't know what to do with them, but I couldn't throw them away. And I didn't throw them away. And I never throw them away. Like, only the tiniest of the tiny, most absolutely unusable piece will go into the trash can. And everything else, I was just hoarding, just stockpiling it. And then a couple of things happened. Is number one, we started launching side gear. And the side gear was all of the small leather journals and wallets and valet trays and things like that. And basically what that is an extension of the aprons, not just from a branding perspective, in which that's a whole other conversation, but using up the scraps, because it starts off the funnel, and at the top of that funnel you've got that main panel for the apron. So we cut that out, and then as those scraps get smaller and smaller and smaller, you got to do something with them down here too. And you can only give out so many keychains. So one of the things that we did in the last year, and I think this is one of the best things that we've made, best decisions we made, is we started packing all of the leather into 10-pound boxes. So as we're done with it, as it has kind of met its end in that funnel, is it goes into various bins. And once it hits those bins, we do our best not to accumulate it, but it just goes into a box. And once that box hits 10 pounds, it goes up in inventory. And so we have sold a surprising amount of scrap leather over the last 2 years. Because, people know that it's quality. It's not like we're just getting in junk from, wherever. This is the leather that we use. We just don't have a good use for it. And some of the pieces are really big pieces. And, you go back to time is money, right? So we could spend the time to develop more and more products that are going to use up every tiny little scrap. But at some point you say, right this second, I don't have any good use for it.
Yeah.
Put it in the box. Somebody else gets a massive piece of leather that
awesome.
they can use for a project. So, and the nice thing is within the maker community, you're kind of giving back. It's like people really need that stuff and they can use it. And people just eat that stuff up. So anyway, so we've done really well with the scraps, just in terms of keeping it out of the landfill and not letting anything go to waste. So I'm really happy about that.
That's awesome. Really awesome. What a great, just way to capture that and really do good with it. I mean, it's not the same as wood. Obviously, we just chuck ours in the fireplace, but I love that you can repurpose it. And
there's value to that as well.
Home and that's awesome.
Well, we donated so much of it, and I won't belabor this topic anymore. But after this is we donated again thousands of pounds of this stuff. But after a while, it became so time consuming to find somebody else who wanted 500 pounds of leather, because not everybody, not every school needs 500 pounds of leather. And it became, kind of consuming. How do we get rid of all this stuff? And then, once our social media following and our reach got big enough and people were like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. Sign me up for some of that. So
that's fantastic.
Anyway. That's awesome. That's a perfect segue actually into the branding side of it. So I think you guys have done an awesome job branding your business, who you are, Calavera Tools. It's I don't know. It says quality to me immediately when I see your logo, everything. It's something about
thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah. So maybe can you elaborate on some of the challenges you had when it came to developing your brand, getting your brand message out there? Any kind of value you think you can provide there?
I would say let me see if I'll try and be concise. If you haven't noticed, I'm a little verbose. But from a branding perspective, we are using the same website, and all right, maybe that's not such a plus, but basically everything that we did as our very first step in branding is exactly what we're doing today because it worked. Like the logo has not changed one iota, one single pixel from the day we started the company.
Wow.
The URLs, the name of the company, the number of people who are like, Calavera, why are you naming your company Calavera? And the funny looks I got at the very beginning, but that's who we are, and it fit. Like it stuck. It was so perfect. So I think we are fortunate to have taken some really good steps early on, so that the backbone of the brand was there, and that wasn't just I guess I'm really good at, no, it wasn't exactly. It wasn't on accident. I knew well enough to reach out to some smart people that I trusted to help me with it in the very beginning. And, we did, and, it really worked. But I will say one of the biggest challenges has been, let's say, growth through social media, because a tremendous amount of our business is driven by Instagram. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, I can see right there on my website, like these are the sources of traffic. And I mean, everybody can obviously, but you see the sources of traffic, and, on a light day, I'll tell you, like today I did not post on Instagram, which is so weird because I post generally at 6:30 a.m. almost every single day. Like I wake up in the morning, and that is the first thing I do is, get that post on Instagram. And those days that I don't post anything at all, it's crickets over at the website. But if I do post, we've always got solid traffic, and that fluctuates significantly with the content that we're putting out there. And I will say that it is, if you're you guys produce content, whether it's podcast or your feed or whatever, but it's a challenge to constantly come up with new content. And I'm not here, my goal is not to just be some Instagram personality and, just entertain people for, the sake of endorphin rush of seeing a bunch of likes. Like,
Sure.
no, we're running a business here. Like
Yeah.
I need this content to sell aprons. And, if I'm just being honest about it, but I also wanted to do it in a way that it's like, people are watching the feed and follow along the story. Like, I don't feel like I'm giving them a hard sell. I don't feel like, I'm using it as, just a constant never ending billboard. And so really, if I do say so myself, I think our engagement is really, really strong. We put together, the call and response. You ask people questions and people just bulldoze with answers. It's so good. The community engagement in, whatever we're putting out there has been incredible. And, I am one of those people, and especially when I was back in corporate and, looking at social media through a different lens, that corporate lens of this is strictly a tool and it is a means to an end to promote the business. I see things a whole lot different now that I am a maker, and it is driving our family business. And I gotta say, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, like, are you gonna have a bunch of friends through social media? I was one of those people, again, back in corporate. It's just like, your friends don't come from social media. Your friends come from, personal interactions and face to face. Like, those are your real friends. But that's totally not true. Like, I have so many incredible friends around the world, and I legitimately call these people friends that, I have developed these relationships on social media. The number of people that I call friend that I've never before met or even spoken to, and half of them, I don't even know their first name. I know their Instagram handle. But I gotta say that I have gotten to know them through their posts. I've gotten to know them through their content, and it really truly is a community. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, buying local is not just about running down to the corner store. It's about buying from your community. And I think that that's one of the things that we've embraced is to really try to be part of the community. And I think that we've been successful, in a genuine, organic sort of way. Like, I don't get a sense that I've never gotten a sense that people felt like we were being phony about it in the least bit, or just trying to pitch or shill stuff. So anyway, obviously we have a little bit of fun with it too, but I would say that that part has definitely been gratifying. It's been very rewarding, not just through the success of the business, but because the community has become so vibrant and has allowed us to be part of it. And if I may add one more piece into that, it's that when I started the company, this goes back to early part of the conversation. My original vision was to have, I thought I was going to have 100 employees. I was going to have this compound, this headquarters. I was going to have a marketing department and accounting, back to my corporate days. And, so my idea was to let other, I wanted to know how to do it so that I could do it myself if I needed to, or, so that I knew what I was talking about. But I wanted to have other people to do that work. And then once I got my hands really into it, into that creative process and into the making process, I couldn't stop. Like I fell absolutely in love with that part of it. And as a result, like the company, I don't have any doubt we could grow it, way bigger than it is, but I like having just a couple of people in the shop. I love being the one who sits at the sewing machine and makes these things with my own hands. Because I can attest to the quality. I know every single apron that goes out of here. And that's not to say that I aspire to be wildly inefficient, but it's a totally different thing that I am doing now than what I originally aspired to. And I didn't know that I wanted it so badly, but I have enjoyed it so tremendously that I wouldn't trade it for anything.
You actually touched on something that we found to be true also. So we hired somebody a while back to do our social media, and it failed. It crashed and burned hard because exactly what you were saying. It wasn't genuine.
Yeah.
She was posting things that were very professional looking. They looked nice. However, they constantly pushing our product down people's throat. And people started unfollowing us really quickly.
Yeah.
And
right.
That's not us. I mean,
that wasn't us either.
We are very much a family-based business. We do everything in our shop, which is also our house. Like everything we do, we're all very interconnected. And so to let somebody else into that bubble, I think is really, really hard just at its bare bones, never mind to not really be giving that message out, know?
Yeah. No, you're so right. And I think that I've struggled with that myself as, so going back to the struggles that we've had with Instagram was, let's say earlier this year, or excuse me, beginning of 2021, I guess, the numbers just totally flattened out. Like the engagement went way down, the views went way down. And, again, I'm not talking about that because I care about the endorphin rush. I don't care about the, seeing the clicks. It's that if we're not getting through, then people aren't learning about what we're doing. People aren't, something isn't working, and then we're not selling product. And I can't continue to do this if we don't sell product, or I've got to go find another platform. It's a business decision. So, earlier in the last year, I was thinking so hard about, hiring in someone, whether an intern or whoever, to come in and try and shake things up with social media. And every time I came so close to doing it, I realized that it's impossible to share that voice. Like you really have to have, just it's such an impossible thing to convey. Like, okay, I want you to post this kind of stuff, but you got to do it in my voice. Well, I have a very specific voice. I have a very specific attitude. And I think people would see right through that so fast. And then all of a sudden, it's not so much that it's phony. The business becomes something else. Yeah, and,
it's not yours
I think
anymore.
that it's exactly. And, that's not to say that I wouldn't, get some help here and there with some video or some photography, but it's more about the, who we are. I think and this does not apply to every business by any stretch of the imagination, but this does apply to us, is that I think it is important for us, Maria and I, to really have our hands on the content so that people understand that we are the ones in this shop making this stuff. We're not just, pushing it off on somebody else.
Yeah. No, I think that's huge. I mean, we have 4 kids and our oldest is 11, and every once in a while we're like, do we get her a phone? No, we shouldn't get her. But if we got her a phone, I bet you she could figure out this TikTok thing, and she could teach us how to, pivot. And she has our voice, and she gets what we're doing. And not yet, but maybe in about 5 or 8 years, we'll be calling her in like, hey, you want to come work for TFT Wood? We got a job for you, to keep it. It's just mind boggling. She'd love a phone. We're not there yet.
Delay that as long as you possibly can. No question about it.
But no, I totally get that. It's it's especially as a small business owner, you really have to be passionate and you really have to be authentic. And if you lose either of those things, I think it's just moments before you're going to kind of crash. And I don't know.
It all ties into developing that brand. Too. You're not genuine. People aren't going to trust you, and if they don't trust you, they're not going to buy from you. People have to sell things without selling things is what it boils down to.
And I think that's ultimately what it's all about. And that's not to say that I won't eventually grow the company in a way that requires a slightly different approach. But, where the business is now and what I want it to be right now, then I think that those are critical pieces, is to maintain that authenticity.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah. So we are out of time, unfortunately. Actually, we're over time, but it's all right. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us on Backwoods Business Podcast. It was awesome.
Thank you guys very much for having me. I appreciate it. Let's definitely stay in touch.
Thanks for watching the Backwoods Business Podcast.
Make sure you like and subscribe below.
And when our next episode is available, it'll pop up right over there. Make sure you click it.
Corner, right there.
All right, get it. Get it.